Joseph Sirol. I have Engineer Rosemary Odwor, who is the General Manager for Commercial Services and Sales at the Kenya Power. I have Engineer Kennedy Owino, the General Manager, Infrastructure Development. And we have Engineer Charles Mora, who is the General Manager in charge of Network Management. They're here to help us walk through the journey and especially to respond to the many questions that Kenyans have. And of course, we had some of them, especially when it comes to the key issues. Many Kenyans talking about the power blackouts, many talking about the access as well as the cost itself. But we'll be getting to the details. First, I want us to take a look at how the electricity sector is organized into the different organizations that got to play in there. And we have the following. We have the Geothermal Development Corporation, which is responsible for exploring the fields for steam. We'll be looking at that. We have the KenGen Power that is responsible for generation. We have IPPs, or independent power producers. There is KETRACO, the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company. We have REREC, the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Company. We also have the Kenya Power itself, the Kenya Power Lighting and Corporation, Power and Lighting Company. Then you have EPRA, which is the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority that is responsible for regulating the industry. Now, if you want to know how that works, of course, like I said, the GDC is responsible for identifying steam fields and also developing them. Once they do that, they'll hand them over to the KenGen, or to IPPs. This is basically about geothermal power. And therefore, once they produce, that is the KenGen and IPPs, they sell that power to the Kenya Power, but they also need KETRACO, the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, that is responsible especially for transmission of the high voltage power from the generating plants to somewhere that the Kenya Power Lighting Company can be able to pick it, usually to be in a position to distribute it to the rest of customers. Then there's another institution that is REREC, the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Company, that is responsible for distribution of electricity to the rural areas, understandably for areas that the Kenya Power and Lighting Company does not think there's economic sense. This comes in to be in a position to distribute power, and of course, that's what the Kenya Power and Lighting Company does. Now, the guests are here, the officials from the Kenya Power Lighting Company. And let's begin with you, Managing Director, because many questions that are being asked by Kenyans, especially on the question of access. Maybe you can help us understand, with that outlay of the organizations that are involved in this sector, then where does the Kenya Power fit in, and what is the actual responsibility that Kenya Power has to the customers, knowing the entire outlay of institutions involved?
Thank you so much, Sam. I think let me really appreciate this opportunity where we can have this big conversation with the Kenyan public and also with the studio and the 4 studios that are set out today. It has really been our desire that we engage as much as possible, because in its role, which I'm going to state shortly, there is so much that the Kenyan public can work with us, can partner with us in overcoming a number of the challenges. I did listen to the various comments that come from the different parts of the country, and definitely there are issues in some areas. But I do know that as we engage, and this is really the path that Kenya Power is taking, to engage as much as possible, so that the Kenyan public has a lot of clarity in their minds. I do remember making a comment yesterday when I was engaging about COFEC and the scrap metal dealers. And one of the things that I did say, or I did state there, Sam, which I want to repeat it here, is that people can have very honest opinions about issues. And they can be very honest. But at times, their honest opinions may not be very accurate. Being honest at times does not insulate you from being wrong. But it is through such conversations that different players can actually realize that while I was honest, but I think I was honestly wrong in certain areas. Now, coming to the role of Kenya Power, you've delineated it quite well. There are those who generate power. Of course, you did mention about GDC prospecting. Once they have done it, the power will either be developed by KenGen or IPPs, where that power is generated. Once it is generated, it has to be transmitted. And the reason why we have transmission, Sam, and indeed the Kenyan public, is the simple reason that whenever you are moving power over long distances, the voltage that you use can really determine how much you lose. So it's always a requirement that after you have generated, you must take it to the highest voltage possible so that you can minimize the losses that you are going to suffer as you move power from where it's generated to where it is consumed. Now, the role of transmission in Kenya is primarily KETRACO, but I would like to state that Kenya Power and Lighting does still have some transmission lines, so that when you look at the entire transmission line portfolio, 3,466 kilometers belong to Kenya Power, and 4,100 belong to KETRACO. So we both play in that particular space. Once we have taken power now to the load centers where they're required, the voltage level then will be brought down, will be stepped down. And that is when the distribution comes in, when the power is now taken to the different consumers, medium voltage, and then you go finally to that end user. So that is really where the role of Kenya Power comes in moving the power from where it has been stepped down to its own medium voltage substations, and finally to the consumer. But apart from that, Kenya Power also does what is called the dispatch function. The dispatch function is the one that is responsible for always estimating, or rather dispatching power to the grid. We do have different sources of power. We have geothermal, which is now the highest with 949 megawatts. It is followed by hydro, which is 838, followed by wind, which is 435, followed by solar, which is 210. We have also thermal, which is 512, and we have biomass, which is 2 megawatts. Now, in all of that mix, on a daily basis, the dispatch function would estimate, based on historical records, how much power is going to be consumed the next day. Once they have established and estimated, then they are going to do what is called planning. Planning in the sense of knowing what power must we dispatch, say, at 10 o'clock. Okay. If we estimate that the demand for tomorrow at 10 o'clock is going to be 1,400 megawatts, which are these sources which we would require to put into the grid, based on, first of all, the master dispatch. Once you've put in all the master dispatch, you now use what is called the merit order, which is the cheapest comes in first until you meet that particular demand. So we do also do that dispatch function. And then finally, of course, we do the retail where we bill the customers for the usage. And after receiving all those monies, we distribute to all the players, right from GDC, KenGen, IPPs, KETRACO, and all the others.
Asante sana. Na bila shaka kwa sababu umeelezea mahali ambapo stima inaanzia hadi mahali ambapo inamfikia mteja, ningependa labda Engineer Rosemary, kwa sababu wewe unasimamia masuala ya mauzo, unaweza kutueleza kwanza kabisa, nikiwa nahitaji stima kwangu, ninahitaji nini, itachukua muda gani kuweza kunifikia, na kuna fedha fulani ambazo ninastahili kulipa?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yes, electricity connection has a process, and we have various processes available to the end user for the connection. There is electricity that is supplied through government funding, and there is electricity that is supplied through individual funding. The government has initiatives that extend supply to neighborhoods, and last mile initiatives that connects households and small businesses. However, where the government initiative has not reached and the consumer would wish to get electricity supply, then we have a process. You make an application. We have application forms available to the end user at no cost to the end user. I will repeat that for emphasis sake. The application is done at no cost. You would get an application form from our nearest office, fill it up. We have attachments that you would give us. One is a confirmation of either ownership or confirmed tenancy of the property. Secondly, you'd give us your identification, which would help us identify you uniquely as a Kenyan. That would be your ID and your PIN, so that we are able to identify you as a Kenyan. And thirdly, you'd direct us to the location where you'd wish to have the supply. But we currently have also enhanced that process. You're able to go to our website, go to the electricity application section, and make the application online. Before you make that application, we guide that have soft copies of those documentation that are required. A soft copy of your ID card, a soft copy of your PIN, a soft copy of your confirmation of ownership or tenancy or lease of the property, and then the details of the location of the property. At that point, if you do it online, then you give us a PIN location of the property. Once that is received by us, we would have it processed into our systems, and you're given a unique reference number. That reference number comes to you, to your phone on SMS, and you're able to also access it via our website and through our other forms of communication with customers. Mm-hmm. We have a USSD communication platform. It is *977#. We also have an app. It is called My Power App. My Power App, you can download it from the App Store. You can download it from iOS, and you can then access your reference number from there using a copy, the details of your ID, and you're able to access your reference number. Once you're given that unique reference number, it is the number we will use to process that application from the time you apply up to the time that you will be connected. The reference number can be used to access the process or the progress of your application, and helps you to be able to track your application. Upon receipt of the application, then we work out the cost of supplying you and give you a quotation for that supply. Subsequently, you make a payment based on that quotation. Our payments are done at our offices or through the official channels that we have provided. We have M-Pesa channel, we have partners whom we have partnered with from where you can pay. No payments is given to an individual for connection of electricity. So please, when you make your payment for electricity, you pay through those official channels. Once the payment is received, then we obtain permission to run the line as designed, and subsequently make the connection to the customer. Thank you.
All right, and we'll get to the question of the cost itself so that you can see the specifics and the different categories that we have. But engineer, maybe you can help us, because there has been, sorry, Engineer Kennedy, we know all of our engineers. There has been concerns from Kenyans talking about that, for instance, one says that we were connected to power, but then the Kenya Power officials came and said that actually the infrastructure you've used, the cables that you've used are substandard and therefore they need to be taken off. And they said that this was done by subcontractors. I don't know what is happening in that area, and how does a customer determine that these are genuine material that are being installed, knowing too well that not everyone is an expert to really know what is right and what is wrong?
No, thank you so much, Sam. I want to draw from what Rosemary has just explained, the process of applying to get connected to power supply. That process is designed so that everything that shall be used in connecting the customer is up to the required standard and specification. The product that we are dealing in, electricity, is a very good product, but can also be very dangerous. And that is why we are very keen on ensuring that standards are followed during the construction process, following an application, which has been done as being outlined. And so there are situations where people can go out there purporting to be representing KPLC. And customers at times have found themselves in such situations where they have been, I would say, conned by people purporting to be KPLC staff. And in such situation, you'd find that those connections were not done through realizing that any power application should follow the due process of application, okay, so that the customers are able to get power supply that is safe and is adequate to ensure that they meet their demand requirements insofar as power is concerned.
Engineer Mwaura, kwa zile fedha ambazo zinalipwa mara tu kama alivyosema Engineer Rosemary, mara tu imefanywa hesabu kuonyesha kwamba hii ndio itakuwa gharama ya kukuletea stima. Ni nini haswa ambacho mteja analipia? Kwa nini nilipie vitu hivi vyote ilhali kwa Mkenya anatarajia kwamba analipia tu kupata hiyo stima? Kwa nini anapaswa kulipia hii miundo msingi?
Thank you, Mashilima. Our charging system is such that what you do is you make capital contribution, considering that this infrastructure, as it was explained earlier, comes all the way from generation, transmission lines, comes to the distribution, to the transformer, up to the last mile where you are getting connected. So that investment where you are putting in, you're only paying for that part of your connection. But that means that after that, this power is using all the infrastructure behind. And in case of anything after you are connected, you are not asked to pay for the repair and maintenance of that network. So this is just like part of the contribution towards your last mile connectivity, but then you are using other infrastructure to bring power to your house or to infrastructure. So it's just like a token payment for that purpose.
Yeah. And the deeper part to that question, Engineer, before you cross over to the government studio, so you want to get connected. Maybe it's a new estate that is being established. So the first person to build a house will actually pay for the line itself from, I don't know whether it's the nearest transformer or whatever the source is. Once they pay, the other customers are still going to pay. Why shouldn't it be the Kenya Power and Lighting Company meeting that cost of that element of infrastructure so that the clients are only paying for the supply of that electricity to their houses?
That's true, but to an extent, if you are coming up with an estate, we only quote you for what you are using for that purpose. Like, for example, we may put a smaller transformer, let's say 100 kVA in an estate. When you come and then the first customer had utilized that capacity, then when you come in, you are only asked to operate that transformer so that you can get your capacity. But you are not asked to pay for the other infrastructure. That's the question was. But as you said earlier, that in terms of our tariff and all that, in terms of our model of operation, is that we don't charge for infrastructure building. But we charge for the service of operations and maintenance. So that element of coming up with new infrastructure has to be made by the customer. Alternatively, there's a government scheme, the Last Mile project. So if you are not able, if you can be able to wait for the government scheme, then that's okay. But most likely or not, you will not be able to wait, and you find there's merit in having connected earlier than waiting for the entire estate to be connected. Yeah.
Naam, bila shaka tunataka kuelekea katika studio ambapo maafisa wakuu kutoka Wizara ya Kawi wapo pamoja na EPRA. Hebu tuelekee katika studio hiyo ambayo inaongozwa na Trevor Mbija na Christine Ojambo.
Asante sana Mashirima Kapombe na Sam Gituko. Let's get straight into it.